Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome, everybody, to a special artist interview with illustration artist Claudia Chanhoi. This episode is in collaboration with ARTPOWHER Contemporary, a collaborative art project initiative that places focus on female identifying and non-binary creatives in the arts. The CEO, Anna Moras-Tumaiulo, founded ARTPOWHER with the aim of raising awareness about gender stereotypes and gender inequality while inspiring change through creativity and collaborations. For International Women's Day in March 2021, I interviewed Claudia about her work with ARTPOWHER for the online exhibition titled Yin My Way Out, which launched on May 8th and will be coming to an end on June 10th. I have put the link to the online viewing room on Artsy within the podcast description, so please do go have a look. Through the link, you can also find an essay that I wrote on the art of illustration, which covers a bit on the history of illustration, on how the sector views illustration, how the emergence of the digital has had an effect on this, and also why there's some friction when it comes to using the labels of illustrator or artist. Within this episode, I chat to Claudia about the exhibition, as well as the topic of labeling oneself as an illustrator. However, we also talk about Claudia's creative process, her professional life, her experiences as a woman in the sector, and much, much more. Thank you to both Anna and to Claudia for this collaboration. And now, on to the interview. Welcome, Claudia. Thank you so much for coming. I'm just going to dive right in and start with the first question. So, as we both know, ARTPOWHER put on an online exhibition with works by yourself, and I wrote a text and I interviewed you for the occasion. So, my very first question is, can you tell me a little bit more about the works that you made for the exhibition, but also a little bit more about your works in general?
Yeah, sure. I put together different series for this exhibition. We have the Love and Desire series, Border Ownership series, and Quarantine series. So for Love and Desire series, I created those pieces when I was, at the start of a new relationship. Basically, before having any sexual relationship with the new person. Every move beyond kissing could be very exciting and seductive. As for Body Ownership series, I use food and underwear to add a bit of playfulness to my work. So there is a piece about pubic hair removal. I know that is your favorite piece. I drew underwear with some hair on it to present my idea of having regrets of removing pubic hair with laser. Because, it is permanent, so your hair doesn't grow back. I thought it would be great if we could just decide how to take care of our pubic hair as easy as how we change our underwear. It's like, every day is different depending on my mood. So you can just take it out and put it on with different style. I think that would be really cool. So I basically just came up with that idea at that time.
Because you mentioned that was my favorite word, because we've chatted about it before. And for me, because I haven't had laser hair removal. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was almost this owning having pubic hair and owning going against the societal status quo of women having to be slippery seals and hairless and all of that. And for me, it was just yes.
It was so funny because I curated it, I think back in 2017 or 2016 or something. So 4 or 5 years ago, I did have my hair removed with laser. So at that time, I was almost on my, final treatments. And I was thinking what if I want my hair to grow back? Because when I removed my hair, I wasn't thinking to impress my, at the time, partner. But it was just sort of maybe it would be easier, for me to take care of my pubic hair, or maybe it would be easier if I would wear any bathing suits and not to worry about anything, you know what I mean? Because also the society, has told women to kind of remove their hair. So I was kind of fell into that. So this is why I created that piece, because, it was actually my personal experience. So lastly, final series, which is Quarantine series, is my latest work among the others. It is relevant to the current climate. Obviously, COVID has kind of like inspired me to do a lot of different work about, quarantine and stuff. So in the series, I talked about quarantine, relationships, and body changes. Basically, some like really silly stuff because I don't want to get too serious with my work, especially during pandemic. I just want to make it funny and put a laugh on people's face. I was like talking about, like boobs like falling down because I've been like sitting on my sofa a lot and not moving around and not, able to go out and, like different things, and talking about, bushes as well, as in like pubic hair, like letting it grow. And I made an animation of it.
I love it because I'm just thinking about like, okay, so in quarantine, obviously no one is wearing a bra anymore. And then
Yeah.
now that like everything's opening up and we have to go out and it's like, oh, I don't want to. It's been so nice to just
To
relax.
sit at home and not do anything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to creating your works, I mean, you've told me now that you have a couple of different thought processes behind your works or different
Yeah.
inspirations, but what is your creative process when going about executing your concepts and really like creating the pieces?
Well, I do believe a good work has to have a good meaning, not just visually pleasing. So, I try to have a concept or a message behind most of my work, I think. I get my inspiration by a lot of things, mostly by my personal experience, conversations with different people, and stories of my friends. Let's say if I am chatting with some of my friends and they talk about their dating experience or just personal life, and I can actually get inspired by them. I usually doodle some sketches on my sketchbook and write down some notes of the idea and or the concepts depending on how I feel at that moment. Once I have visualized a new piece, then I will sketch it properly and then trace it, and then I'll scan it and then send it to my own computer and then work on Adobe Illustrator, which is a digital program. Sometimes I do work on acrylic paintings for arts exhibitions. For some reason, I can visualize my work quite quickly. I'm not sure if it's a good or bad thing. Most of the time, I can decide, what colors I'm going to apply for the piece or the composition of my work is going to be. So I actually can visualize things quite quickly.
I mean, judging by how successful your art career has been so far, I think that it's a very, very good thing because I think that it's a very instinctive thing that comes through in your works. And thank you
Yeah.
for letting me know the whole entire kind of technical process of it, because I think that that's really interesting when someone who, like myself, because I don't make art, I think that sometimes I lack a little bit of understanding of how certain things are made. And when it comes to digital illustration or even, for example, like printmaking, I think that it's always really useful to find out more about that whole art making process. And on that note, when it comes to artist, illustrator, you call yourself an illustration artist. And we
Mm-hmm.
know that there is a lot of loaded connotations that are associated with those types of labels. And I know that you and I did go into this a little bit more in the written interview that we conducted together. But just for the sake of the podcast and just to get a little bit more understanding, what is your opinion on the position of illustration in the arts?
I think illustration these days can go into a lot of different fields right now. It goes into fashion, editorial, music, interior design, packaging, ads and campaigns, and even fine art too. I think back in the days, most job opportunities were only children books or sports illustrations for magazines or newspapers. So it could be quite limited, I think. People may consider illustration is less important than fine arts because it has a strong commercial aspect. Illustrations can get commission projects from different brands, companies much easier because illustration is considered to be commercial and versatile from a commercial standpoint, which I really do agree with that. I guess the job nature is more variable, and that also explains why people might not consider illustration as art. I personally don't think we need to define what is art, just because I think art comes in different forms, really. I guess it is a very complicated debate whether illustration is art or not. I think it really depends on what do the other people think about what art really is.
I completely agree with you. And for anyone listening who wants to know more about my standpoint, because I won't take up too much of our time talking about it, but for the occasion of Claudia's exhibition, I wrote a whole essay on illustration and how it is seen within the arts. And I bring in a couple of points. One of them has to do with branding and has to do with that kind of commercial aspect and how that has had an effect on how the art world sees illustration. So I completely agree with you, Claudia. I think that you make really, really good points. And for me, illustration is definitely art because even if it's commissioned or it's commercial, it's still your creative voice and your creative process that's being put into it. But on that note, let's talk a little bit more about your professional experiences. So you work a full-time job, right? So tell me about how you find balance between your full-time job and your art career.
I just think you have to work a bit harder. I don't know if I can find a balance, but I just think, I work during weekdays after work. I mean, as in after my full-time design job and weekends also. And of course, I need to put time aside for my social life, self-care. I work out 3 times a week, which is really important to me, to have a healthy and happy lifestyle. Sometimes it can get a bit stressful if you have a deadline or an exhibition coming up that you have to deal with lots of different things, not just the curated part of it, but also contracts, payment, emails, self-promotion, and sometimes it can get really crazy. And also I'm quite addicted to Instagram sometimes. I have to admit, I have to do some toxic stalking on Instagram to kind of make my life feel a little bit more balanced, if that makes sense. It's like you have to eat some junk food and healthy food at the same time to feel balanced.
That actually ties right in perfectly to my next question. And it's this whole aspect of social media and Instagram,
Yeah.
because what is really important within the age of social media, but what is also extremely time consuming is building a brand. And you seem to have that pretty mastered, though. Can you tell us a bit more about how you've built your brand and how that has had an influence, positive or maybe negative, on your career?
I come from a design background that I think it does help me a lot with building my own brand, because I did learn a bit about branding and stuff and a bit of marketing, obviously. To be honest, when I started my illustration career, I wasn't thinking it would become an actual brand, if that makes sense. I just thought Instagram would be a great tool to be my online portfolio, to promote my work and to connect to people. And then after a while, I just realized Instagram is actually a business tool for creatives to put their work out there and to get noticed and basically get jobs. We don't really need to rely on traditional art galleries or creative agencies heavily like years ago. I just wanted to see how people would actually react to my work. Once I got my first 100 followers, which was not a lot at that time, I started posting work regularly and make sure that my work is consistent and authentic to myself. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to hold my very first solo exhibition on my first year, and then got my first commission project because of the show. And I think social media definitely is really good for creatives if you don't have, let's say, if you don't have any agency to represent you, or if you haven't actually got a chance to work with any big brands yet.
So you just mentioned working with big brands. What is your stance on collaborating with other brands?
I think my approach to my work is a little bit different. Maybe, again, I come from a design background, so I think my approach is a little bit more like, I would have that kind of like design thinking behind my work. So when it comes to commission projects, I tend to listen to my clients first, and I would like to know what they want from me and what would be the brief exactly. And also I'm lucky, that most of my clients would give me a lot of creative freedom. And I think they really want 100% of my work, as in the style has to be 100% Claudia Chanhoi, the work has to be 100% like my previous work. And of course, there are times that you need to follow up with the payment and, all the annoying stuff that I've mentioned before, like contracts, make sure they don't use your work for anything that the contract actually hasn't even mentioned about. And this is why having a contract is super important. And also working with brands can be a great self-promotion as well, because let's say if you are working with a brand that is relatively quite big, then maybe once you've worked with them, and then they will also let people know that this brand and you have been collaborated before, so that you can actually sort of get your name out there as well. And then by then hopefully you'll get more clients.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, all in all, it's a very positive thing to have collaborations with brands. But I definitely get how, when someone does approach you, and I think this goes for anyone wanting to commission something from an artist, is that the artist has their own style, their visual language, their way of doing things. And if you don't want that, then maybe you shouldn't be commissioning from that specific artist or illustrator.
Yeah, exactly. And I also have some sort of like bad experiences with clients, of course. Sometimes they will just tell you that they have super low budgets. I do believe it has happened to a lot of creatives as well, not just me. And they would just tell you that they don't have lots of budgets. And then they would just say that, but you will have lots of exposure. So can you like do a piece for free? And I would definitely mention you and then tell the world that you did the piece. And most of the time I would definitely, turn down and tell them that, I will only work on paid commission because I have lots of projects and I have to prioritize my time for clients who actually pay.
I completely understand where you're coming from, because as an art historian and a writer, I have had the situations. I guess, I can talk about like one where the exact same thing happened. Someone approached me and said, "Oh, would you be interested in this?" And I said, "Yes." Basically, I wrote something for this person and they never got back to me. They basically said they were happy to have me write the piece. They said that they couldn't pay me. And I was like, okay, but because of your circumstances, actually, like, I do want to connect with you and I do respect what you do. And so I will write this piece. It's not very long. That's okay. And then I got burned, and this person just basically professionally ghosted me. And I actually then approached the person about a year later and they apologized to me. And I think that that was really nice. They should have apologized to me without me having to approach them, but hey.
Yeah, at least they apologized.
Yeah, yeah. And that was a lesson for me, because since then, I don't think I've taken anything unpaid. I say no to unpaid things unless, oh no, I did take one thing unpaid, and that was for a very good friend of mine. And I think that that's where where you can decide what exceptions you make, or where you do things for people and work and learn and things like that. But when it comes to writing text, basically 99% of the time for me, even if it's a tiny, tiny fee, or if I trade it with an artwork or whatever, but I will not do it for free or for quote unquote exposure, because that's just
Yeah,
not enough.
definitely not. Because exposure, you can't pay your rent with exposure, can you? But I think if it's for, charity projects, let's say if 100% of the sales, goes to the charity, then yes, I can definitely think about it. But let's say if the brand or company is making money out of your art, definitely do not work for free, because you're also spending lots of your time and energy and your skills and basically all of your efforts on that work, and then they're just using it for free. And by that means that they don't actually respect you and also the industry as a whole.
Yes. And this is where I just want to give a shout out to Anna from Art Power, because Anna has always been very respectful of that. And I think that that's what makes it really good to work with people like that, because you feel valued. You feel valued as a person, as a creative, as someone working within the arts and cultural sector. So yeah. But if you could pick any collaboration or project, what would your dream collaboration be?
That is a good question. I have done a few merchandise prints and paintings for different projects and exhibitions. I think most of the time the products or the forms are just like flat images or basically just an object. So I've always wanted to do something interactive and immersive with my work. I tend to incorporate food and different setting in my work a lot, especially when I talk about dating culture and modern relationships. I think it would be a dream if I could turn those objects, let's say the jelly or the food that I created, and I can turn those objects into an actual dining experience and let people immerse themselves in the environment, let's say a restaurant setting or an actual shop, so that people can enjoy the food while experiencing the message that I want to say. I think that would be really cool. Or maybe simply to have like a speed dating section in the restaurant while having my jelly. That would be super amazing.
Oh my God. It sounds like you've really thought out this full concept of this immersive art experience. I think that
I
sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
I have actually talked about this concept to several people, but it hasn't, I mean, I haven't actually got a chance to make it happen yet. But hopefully soon, one day.
Yeah, I mean, let's just blame it on COVID. Like, oh, it hasn't happened yet because, we haven't been able to eat
I talked
indoors for
about it
years.
I talked about it 2 years ago, but yeah, let's blame it on COVID.
Hmm. I mean, but hey, you know what? Now that things are opening up and it's getting a bit better, and I will definitely come if I can to
Oh,
experience
that would be great.
this
I
immersive
hope.
speed dating thing. That sounds so fun. But on to the next question. What is it like, because of your concepts and because your work can have quite explicit or quite sexual connotations? What is it like being female in the industry plus having works that are like that and have those messages?
I receive sometimes a lot of inappropriate messages through Instagram. I've received dick pic from someone that I don't even know and some random messages from people. Most of them are men. I mean, obviously, they don't really care about my work, and they just kind of want to approach me and see if I would respond to them, I guess. Sometimes when I touch on some taboo topics such as media censorship or expressing sexual desires as a woman or anything that is related to sex really can create lots of hatred, which is really sad to know, I think. So I guess this is also why I like to present my work in a light-hearted way, so that it allows people to think about the social issues with an open heart. With that being said, I also don't want my work to be super PC. I think it's pretty hard to find a balance, as you don't want to piss people off, but at the same time, you don't want it to be super, PC, because your work would just become super flat and boring, and basically you start losing your voice, I guess. I can also share my personal story with a senior male gallery owner when I was in Maywood, Miami. Um, so I think it was back in 2017 when I was having my second or third solo exhibition. I went back to the gallery where I was having my exhibition at, and I mean, at another gallery. So at that time, my gallerist wasn't around, and the gallery assistant told me a senior visitor wanted to speak to me about my work. And I was like, yeah, sure. And then I came with her, and I found out that he was another gallery owner, basically the gallery owner of another gallery, which was a lot bigger and more established. And then he said that he was a big fan of my work and asked my contacts for further discussion. And of course, I gave it to him because I was like, yo, that would be great if I could have, another opportunity in Miami. That would be amazing, right? So I gave my email address to him, and then very soon he emailed me and asked me to have dinner with him. I thought it would be just a coffee, but he insisted on having dinner with me. And then he asked me, where do I live? And he wanted to pick me up. And of course, I didn't want to give my address to him because that would be too dangerous to give your address to someone that you don't even know. He was basically a complete stranger to me, right? And during the dinner, he barely asked about my work. But then he just commented on my appearance, mentioned he would love to take me to Costa Rica. I mean, it was so strange. And then apparently he wasn't interested in my art at all. And I basically just had a dinner with him without talking much about my work. And he basically just asked for my phone number. And obviously I didn't give it to him. And then he emailed me several times and I never responded back. I think, I talk about sexuality a lot in my work, but I think it doesn't mean that I will be sexually attractive to anyone. I think to me, the way he approached me was super unprofessional. I don't think it was appropriate at all to reach out to people like that.
Just because your work is sexual in some way, shape, or form, or talks about sexuality, or has anything to do with nudity, which doesn't necessarily have to be inherently sexual. Let's just point that out as well, is just because there's nudity doesn't mean it's sex, right? That's not an invitation. That's not an invitation for anything. Like, that's not giving consent to send a dick pic. I mean, come on. And if you're going to approach, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm like hot blooded right now because you do not, in a position of power, which you are if you're the gallery director or manager or owner of a very established gallery, you do not abuse that power to try and pick up beautiful artists just because you're interested in what, sleeping with them or taking them to Costa Rica or using them as your arm candy. I just, like, respect them for the work that they do, but don't try and take them out under the guise of liking
Yeah.
the work that they do. It's just gross. Like, control yourself. God, sorry. I'm getting really like, I am so sorry that that happened to you. That must have been really uncomfortable. It must have felt degrading at the time.
Absolutely. I would say that it was one of the most disgusting or the most horrible dinner that I've ever been. But I think if you approach me and say, hey, I think you're really attractive, would you be interested in having dinner with me? And perhaps we can have a little bit something afterwards. And at least you are direct, right? And tell me what you want. But don't tell me that you are interested in my work and we could discuss your work over a dinner or something. And I think to me, you kind of just like lied to me.
It's just gross because it's like, do you really think I'm going to jump into bed with you because you can maybe do something for my career? Like, I mean, I don't know. That's a whole nother like can of worms that we could open up when talking about that. But I just think that it's really terrible that someone, as I said, abused their position of power in the arts. If they have, that type of status, these big galleries, they can make or break someone's career when they decide to sign an artist or when they represent an artist and exhibit an artist. That can really push their careers and it can be a really big deal. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know what gallery, and obviously we're not going to disclose that, but it, because you said it was quite a well-established one, it could be one where you feel like, okay, this could have been a really big step. And then going to dinner and having that just be really uncomfortable and feeling like you're being looked at and desired for completely different things other than your creative output.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's just,
totally.
ugh,
Yeah.
ugh. Have you actually shared this story before? Like, did you ever go back to that gallery manager and say, hey, that made me uncomfortable? Or have you told anyone else about this?
Well, at the time I didn't because I don't know, maybe I was a bit younger at the time and I didn't know what to do. And also he owns one of the biggest galleries in Miami. So, well, but I did actually write the story on my own Instagram and kind of, tell the world of the experience that I just had. So basically after dinner, it was quite late. Friday, it was almost, I think it was midnight, and I was still very upset. And then I just wrote the story on my Insta and say, oh, what is the disadvantage of being a female artist? Especially do a lot of work about, sex. Sexuality basically in modern dating relationships. And then I just basically wrote the story from start to finish and told people that it is not okay to approach artists like that when you said that you're interested in that work. You really told me that you like my work, but actually you're just after something else. I just wrote it on my Instagram, and at the time I actually got quite a lot of response from different people and say, oh, sorry about that. And we should really face the problem and not let this happen again.
But of course, it does happen again. It happens over and over.
I'm sure
and over.
it happens all the time. And also, I'm sure it happens a lot in any industry, right? Not just the art, not just the art world.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, everywhere. And I think that that's why, at least from my perspective and what I've experienced in just my career, but also in my friendships and things, is that a lot of women are coming together. I think that maybe the internet and having these different connections and groups and being able to have these discussions on a more global scale, I think that it's really nice because there is this community then that develops where you feel supported and you feel like you can talk about these things. I think that it still is a really good step in the right direction in having women come together and talk about it. Because I think in the past, let's say maybe 50 years ago, people wouldn't talk about these things. My family member, who is female, told me about something that she experienced. And I said, "Well, did you tell anybody?" And she said, "No. Who would I tell? Who would I tell?
Mm,
It was all I was the only woman in the whole
yeah,
office. Who would I tell?" So that's what it was like being a powerful woman, 50 years ago, or
yeah.
I'm like 30 years ago, even 10 years ago.
I guess women right now actually are a little bit more empowered to say or to tell the world what they have experienced and what kind of like unfair treatments they have had. I think it is really good to see that women, have that kind of power and courage to speak, on their mind. But at the same time, I know there's still a lot of women actually don't have the privilege or don't have the power to say about things that they want to tell the world.
100%. You're right. We are in a privileged position to be able to speak about it, but it's important to acknowledge so that people who still don't feel like they can speak about it, so that they can be helped as well and they can be addressed and things can begin to change and improve as well. But I guess the first step is really talking about it, addressing it, because that's how you acknowledge that there even is a problem that has to be solved.
Yeah, yeah.
But on that note, after that really interesting and intense discussion, I'm going to ask you my very last question. And that is, what is one positive change you envision for the art world in the future?
I think the art world seems to be quite hard to tap into. I think we have sort of, talked about that before. Illustration might be seen as less important as fine art. I don't know. I think Instagram has definitely given me a lot of opportunities that I can never imagine. I hope the art world can be more welcoming to different artists. And I think right now there's still a big distance between the art world and small galleries. I guess maybe the art market is very different. I don't know. The art collectors and buyers maybe are not the same as the visitors who go to the small galleries. So I hope one day that we can sort of like, bridge them together and as not to make them too separate. Because I think the artwork right now can be quite close off when you think about Art Basel or any like big art fairs or art events. Sometimes you think you see the big galleries or even the auction houses are doing their thing, and then some small galleries are doing their own tiny thing that are not getting a lot of exposure or noticed. Then maybe I hope one day that it doesn't have to be, oh, if you want to go to the bigger art market, you have to do fine art. If you just want to do commercial, then maybe you should, change your minds and not to do that kind of art and do maybe something else. You know what I mean? I hope that we can actually take the label out and, to be more open to different artists in different fields.
I could not agree more. As I said, that was my very last question. So, Claudia, thank you so much for coming on my podcast and for chatting with me about all these things. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.